If you had asked me 2 years ago what the next big trend in creator cameras would be, I probably would have said better sensors, better AI, or maybe even 360 cameras becoming mainstream. What I definitely wouldn't have predicted is that we'd be talking about companies trying to merge a pocket gimbal camera and a selfie drone into one product. But that's exactly where we are today. Over the last couple of years, DJI accidentally created two of the most successful creator categories we've seen in a long time. The first was the Osmo Pocket 3, which completely revitalized handheld gimbal cameras. The second was the Neo, which made autonomous selfie drones feel accessible to everyday creators, rather than just drone enthusiasts. Now, something very interesting is happening. Instead of simply competing with DJI head-to-head in one category, companies are beginning to combine both ideas into something entirely new. We first saw the beginning of this shift with Insta360. They entered the pocket-style market with the Luna series, while at the same time rumors and patent filings suggested they were also developing a Neo-style pocket drone. At that point, it looked like Insta360 wanted to challenge DJI on two separate fronts, but HoverAir has just taken a very different approach. Instead of building two competing products, they've unveiled the HoverAir Versa, a modular system where a handheld pocket camera transforms into a flying camera by attaching it to a lightweight wing assembly. In other words, rather than asking users to choose between a pocket camera and a Neo, HoverAir is asking a much bigger question: what if you never had to choose at all? And honestly, I think that's why this announcement deserves attention, not because Versa is guaranteed to succeed, but because it represents a completely different way of thinking about creator gear. Most camera companies still think in terms of individual products. They build an action camera, a drone, a pocket gimbal, or a mirrorless camera. HoverAir seems to be thinking about workflows instead. Instead of asking, how do we make a better drone, they're asking, how do we reduce the number of devices creators have to carry? That's a subtle difference, but it changes everything. Think about the typical travel creator today. If you're serious about content, there's a good chance you're carrying multiple cameras. An action camera for rugged shots, a pocket camera for smooth handheld footage, a drone for cinematic aerials, maybe even a mirrorless camera for your main videos. Every additional device means another battery, another charger, another memory card, another protective case, and more weight in your bag. At some point, convenience starts disappearing. So HoverAir's idea is surprisingly logical. If one camera module could perform exceptionally well on the ground and then become your aerial camera with a simple snap into a flight module, suddenly your workflow becomes much simpler. According to HoverAir, that's exactly what Versa is designed to do. On the ground, it functions as a dedicated pocket camera with a 3-axis mechanical gimbal for stabilized handheld footage. When you attach it to the wing module, it transforms into a self-flying aerial camera capable of launching without a traditional controller, automatically tracking subjects, and performing more than 10 intelligent flight modes. It's essentially one camera changing roles depending on what you need at that moment. Now, before everyone gets too excited, let's slow down for a second. Because combining two products into one sounds fantastic in theory. But history tells us that hybrid products often struggle with one very important challenge: compromise. A product designed to do everything rarely does everything perfectly. That's where I think Versa's real challenge begins. Let's start with the handheld camera side. DJI's Pocket series became incredibly popular because it focused almost entirely on delivering the best handheld experience possible. Mechanical stabilization, compact size, excellent image quality, intuitive controls, and long recording sessions. Every design decision supported that single purpose. On the other hand, the Neo wasn't trying to be a pocket camera. It was designed to launch from your hand, safely fly around you with enclosed propellers, automatically track subjects, and make aerial filming feel effortless. Those are completely different engineering priorities. Now imagine trying to combine both products into one camera module. Suddenly, every design decision becomes more complicated. The camera needs to detach securely hundreds or even thousands of times without becoming loose. The drone module has to remain lightweight enough for efficient flight while supporting a camera that's also designed for handheld use. Battery life becomes more challenging because you're now asking one system to handle two completely different workloads. Heat management changes, durability changes, even the physical connector between the camera and the wings becomes a potential long-term reliability concern. These aren't reasons why the product can't work. They're simply the engineering questions HoverAir will have to answer if this concept is going to succeed. What's particularly interesting is that HoverAir isn't marketing Versa purely as a drone. They're calling it a self-flying camera, and that's an important distinction. Unlike traditional drones, the focus isn't on flying long distances or performing complex manual maneuvers. The emphasis is on quickly capturing yourself from perspectives that would normally require another person holding a camera. That philosophy has actually been part of HoverAir's identity for years. Long before DJI entered this space with the Neo, 00 Robotics introduced the original hover camera Passport back in 2016, followed by the X1, X1 Pro, and X1 Pro Max. Rather than trying to become another DJI, HoverAir has consistently focused on autonomous flying cameras instead of traditional consumer drones. Versa feels less like a new direction and more like the natural evolution of that philosophy. Another area where HoverAir seems to be pushing harder is software. The company talks about AI-assisted framing that analyzes the environment, recommends camera placement, and automatically crops for balanced compositions. They also introduced something called 3D Worlds, where the flying camera performs a controlled flight around a subject before reconstructing a three-dimensional scene that can later be viewed from different angles. Those features aren't necessarily replacing traditional filmmaking techniques, but they do show where the industry is heading. Increasingly, camera companies aren't just competing on hardware anymore, they're competing on software, AI, and workflow efficiency. And that brings me back to DJI. Whether they intended it or not, I genuinely believe the Pocket 3 and Neo have influenced almost every company in the creator camera industry. Pocket 3 reminded manufacturers that people still value dedicated handheld cameras when they're compact, simple, and produce excellent results. Neo proved that drones don't always need controllers, complicated settings, or lengthy setup processes to be enjoyable. Instead of copying those products directly, competitors are now asking themselves how they can evolve those ideas into something new. Insta360 appears to be exploring that through multiple products. HoverAir is exploring it through modularity. I wouldn't be surprised if other companies start experimenting with similar concepts over the next few years, because the underlying problem hasn't changed. Creators want to carry less gear without sacrificing creative flexibility. There's also a commercial side to this strategy that's worth thinking about. For years, companies competed by offering slightly better specifications, a larger sensor, higher resolution, better stabilization. But eventually those improvements become incremental. What's much harder for competitors to copy is a workflow advantage. If Versa genuinely replaces two devices in your backpack, that becomes a much stronger selling point than simply advertising another 8K camera or another 50-megapixel sensor. People don't buy products purely because of specifications. They buy products because they solve problems. Of course, everything depends on execution. We still don't know some of the most important details. How good is the camera compared to dedicated pocket cameras? How long does it fly? How heavy is the complete system? What's the actual image quality? How reliable is the tracking? And perhaps most importantly, what will it cost? Those questions will ultimately determine whether Versa becomes a category-defining product or simply an interesting experiment that never reaches mainstream adoption. Personally, I don't think HoverAir is trying to beat the Pocket 3. I don't think they're trying to beat the Neo either. They're trying to compete with something much bigger, the growing amount of gear creators feel they need to carry. That's a very different battle, and if they get it right, it could influence the direction of creator cameras for years to come. So after looking at everything, I think this announcement represents something much larger than one new product. It suggests the industry is slowly moving away from building isolated cameras toward building complete creator systems. DJI sparked that movement with two hugely successful products. Insta360 quickly recognized the opportunity, and now HoverAir may have just introduced the first serious attempt to merge those worlds into a single device. Whether Versa ultimately succeeds or not, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The next generation of creator cameras won't just compete on image quality. They'll compete on convenience, workflow, and how little they ask you to carry. Now I'd really like to hear your thoughts because I think this is one of the most interesting product concepts we've discussed on the channel this year. If Versa could deliver 90% of the Pocket 3 experience on the ground and 90% of the Neo experience in the air, would you actually replace two devices with one? Or do you think dedicated products will always outperform hybrids? And perhaps the bigger question is this where creator cameras are heading, Or is it simply another ambitious idea that sounds better on paper than it does in real life? Let me know in the comments because I have a feeling this conversation is only just beginning.